Thanks everybody for joining me. I appreciate you taking time out of your day to connect with me and hang out and chat all things Always On VPN. My name is Richard Hicks. I'm your host today, of course, as always, and this is our March 2024 Q1 2024 Always On VPN Ask Me Anything. I do have a brief agenda I want to share with you. Just kind of, if you've not joined this call before, I'll share with you the kind of the flow of how things go. But for today, I want to talk to you briefly. I want to share with you about a training opportunity I have coming up on this is a virtual online training event. It's not for Always On VPN, but it's a related technology, so I think you might be interested in that. I also want to share with you a bit of information and news about a new reporting online or feature reporting capability that is pretty compelling for Always On VPN that I think really addresses a rather glaring shortcoming for anybody with Always On VPN with more than a handful of servers. I think you'll be interested in that. I want to talk briefly about InTune Cloud PKI because Always On VPN administrators might be interested in this. I want to also touch upon some updates to CSP. CSP is the configurations service provider. It is the way you would configure Always On VPN if you were using the custom XML option in InTune, or if you're using PowerShell with SCCM or something else like that. I want to also share with you some known issues. This is kind of something that we do on this call, where I'll just talk about some kind of the problems people are having that are rather systemic. So this is helpful because if you're encountering this problem, you'll know you're not alone. Two, I do have some workarounds that may potentially bring some relief there. And then finally, of course, the main event. Everybody's here to get their questions answered. So this is a Q&A. It's an Ask Me Anything, and that, of course, is the important part. We'll get to that shortly, but briefly, a bit of housekeeping here, and of course, shameless self-promotion. Always encourage you to join the newsletter. So if you want to sign up for my newsletter, I send out the newsletter periodically, occasionally. I don't spam you too much, hopefully. I send article updates when I've got a few, posts. If there's any, important information, security updates, vulnerabilities, known issues, maybe it's training opportunities or something like that, I'll send those out on the list as well. So you can sign up there at richardhicks.com/newsletter. And as always, I'm obviously the author of Implementing Always On VPN on A-Press Media, and I have a handful of video training courses on Pluralsight. If you are not a part of Pluralsight, would strongly encourage you to subscribe. There is just a ton of fantastic content, not only from yours truly, but from lots of people. I've learned a lot of very cool things there as well. The other thing about the Pluralsight is I do have an Always On VPN video training course on Pluralsight. It is a magnum opus. It comes in at almost 7 hours. It is basically the movie version of the book. So if you're a visual learner, Pluralsight's going to be your best bet. You can sign up actually for a free evaluation there too. I think it's a 10 or 15-day free trial. So if you're interested in checking that out, I would encourage you to do so. You can find the book at aovpnbook.com. You can learn more about my Pluralsight courses at richardhicks.com/Pluralsight. Awesome. So moving on, I wanted to share with you all a new training event that I have come up. I've actually partnered with the folks at Via Monstra Online Academy. This is Johan Arvidmark's creation. It's a online training academy focused mostly on systems management, configuration manager, system center configuration manager, SCCM, InTune, and so forth. And we got together and put together a course where it's going to be covering certificates, all things certificates and InTune. This is a 3-day live training course. Again, all aspects of InTune certificate delivery and management. There is a ton of good information that you're going to find in this class. There is sadly very little reliable, concise, and accurate information on the internet about this, about certificates in InTune, especially around deploying SCEP. If you've deployed SCEP, Network Device Enrollment Service, and as for Windows Server, probably doing that wrong. I've read dozens of guides, and I don't think any of them have been completely accurate, and most of them, if not all of them, have really poor security practices. So I think if you're looking at that, you'll probably want to take a look at this course. We do cover both PKCS and SCEP as well. If you know me, you know I'm a fan of PKCS. I think it's a great way to deliver certificates, but we'll cover both PKCS and SCEP. But we will go deep on both of those. We're also going to touch upon Cloud PKI. So Microsoft introduced Cloud PKI just a month or so ago, and we're going to cover that in the training class as well. We're going to have lots of security best practices, tons of live demonstrations, and I'm going to be sharing some sample files and scripts to help you deploy, securely and automate the deployment of things like NDES. And I think you'll find all of that very compelling. So encourage you to join. You can sign up or learn more about the class just by going to richardhicks.com/masterclass. I wanted to share with everybody on the call today a little bit about a product that I don't want to say I had a hand in making. I kind of spurred it on. The folks at PowerOn Platforms, they're the team that brought you the Always On DPC. If you're not familiar with that, that's Dynamic Profile Configurator, and it was a way to implement and manage Always On VPN client configuration settings using Active Directory and group policy. And ultimately, they extended that to support InTune deployment as well. So it's an awesome tool. One of the things after the product DPC kind of became mature, and I was having a discussion with some of the folks at PowerOn there, and I said, hey, you guys are software developers. You guys should really create a centralized reporting solution for RRAS. I said, I deploy RRAS for Always On VPN for customers all over the world. I've done many large-scale deployments, but I have tons of deployments that are just 2, 3, 4 servers, even on the small side. And one of the things that we struggle with is reporting. And I said, I've had a few customers kind of write their own things, and they've looked pretty cool. I said, it'd be great to have a commercial product. And they informed me that, actually we'd thought about this and we had actually tried it, built it, and didn't think it was going to be viable. So anyway, I kind of encouraged them to revisit that. They've spent the better part of a year ironing out a lot of the challenges and issues with this. But at the end of the day, they now have this Always On VPN centralized reporting, the ALVPN reporting solution. And it's a really cool solution. I want to just show it to you briefly, but ultimately, it's kind of one-stop shopping, one location for all of your data, and not just user activity, but health, configuration, status, and those types of things. It is cloud-based, so it's based on Azure. There's an agent that gets installed on your RRAS servers, and it pushes the data to Azure. And it's not just user activity. It's important. It's also configuration details, certificate details, performance and health details. There's all kinds of cool stuff in there. And ultimately, it is basically a comprehensive overview of all of your RRAS server configuration and health status. So you get a single holistic view of all of your servers. And the nice thing about it is going to be able to very easily identify any sort of configuration issues, anything that might be out of band. And in my demo, I'll show you that. It also includes certificate status monitoring. It's fantastic for resource and capacity planning and forecasting. One of the challenges that many of my customers face is how much resource do I need to support 2,000 concurrent connections? And the answer is always it depends, right? Because there's no way to define what a specific user is or does. And one user might be very different. One user is just using, some light, file server access, and one's pulling, video streaming files over it and doing CAD files and what have you. So it's very difficult to do that. One of the nice things you can do with this centralized reporting is you can get a view over time of resource utilization. And so you can use that to very easily extrapolate and say, hey, if I've onboarded 1,000 users right now and I'm at 80% capacity, I'm not going to make it to my target of 3,000 users, right? But you can actually see that trending over time, and you can see all of that there. This is and actually, by the way, that last point is really important. User activity reporting. This has been the bane of administrators everywhere, is if you have more than one server and you need to generate a user activity report, one of the challenges, of course, is which server did they access? If you're behind a load balancer, or even if you're just using, Azure Traffic Manager or DNS round robin, you have more than one server. They could have been on any one server. They could have bounced between the servers even during the day if they got kicked off and rerouted to another server. That can be challenging. One of the things that this solution does is it feeds all of that into a central location, so I can actually do a search for an individual user, and then it will show me all of the users that they connected to, and then I can drill down and look at actual connection details there. And I'll demonstrate that to you here in just a second. This is just a kind of a quick. This is a screen cap basically of the solution, but I want to actually show you. Jump over here. So this is actually the solution here. It is a Power BI app. So when you install this, it uses Azure Storage, and then it uses Power BI to generate these reports. But you have a nice summary overview, all of my servers, general high level information about how many current sessions I have, how much throughput I'm seeing, and so forth. The number of active connections. So you can see I have nobody connected to this. So, but anyway, if I go to the server overview, I get more detailed information. I can actually drill down, and if I highlight an individual server, I can see the status about that specific server. But I can actually just get a very quick. This is really important too. We have certificate health status. Certificates are probably certificate expiration is probably the most common cause of outages for Always On VPN, and so having the ability to see this right there is going to be helpful. If I go to the configuration, I get even more details. What I was talking about earlier is trying to spot configuration anomalies. So for example, here, this is a contrived scenario. I've actually done this on purpose. But what you'll see here is that I've set up all of these servers, and I'm expecting to have 500 ports each for IPv2 and SSTP. And you can see that I actually have one here that only has 128 ports. This is a misconfiguration. I might not have seen this until I had some sort of problem with this server. So that's really tremendously helpful to be able to see stuff like that. We can also see things, again, here's our certificate health status. There are no certificates on these servers because I've configured TLS offloading for these servers, but you'll see on these two servers, we actually have certificates and they are healthy, so that's good. Jump down to the server performance. This is kind of a historical view of the resource utilization for the individual servers, and there are, you can this goes back all the way to the date that I installed it, but you can actually do, a range. I can see, well, what did it look like for this period of time, and then of course, the charts and graphs will refresh. I can also select an individual server. If I'm having problems with a specific server, I could just say, well, what was this VPN2 doing? And then the charts will update and show me this information here. So really powerful. Connection history is another one. I can view the number of connections. Not super compelling here in my demonstration environment because I don't have a lot of connections, right? Client distribution is really helpful in determining, how evenly the traffic is being distributed across your environment, and it gives you some ability to look at, kind of client, high level, at least client connectivity and the connections by endpoint. The connection detail, I think, is a huge one. As I'd said before, if you're looking for trying to run user activity reports, the real challenge here is that trying to find out which server they went to, right? So in this case, I've specified a date range and I need to know where this user is going to go. So I'm just going to select this user right from the list. And then, of course, it just shows me their user activity. And of course, if I need to drill down and see, well, what were they doing on this very specific server on this time, I can highlight that, and then I have all of this stuff. So if you were doing this, sort of thing on using the native tools, you would have to run this across all of your servers. You could write some PowerShell. There's some commands you could use in PowerShell to kind of aggregate this data. But the real challenge is having that all in a centralized location. And of course, data flow just gives you an idea. Let me change this to all users. Data flow gives you an idea of what kind of traffic you're seeing. These are user traffic generating per server. So lots of good stuff there. If you're interested in that, don't hesitate to reach out. I'd be happy to either give you a more in-depth demonstration, I'd be happy to arrange a trial license for you and maybe help you get the software installed so you can evaluate that in your license. You can get a free 30-day trial or eval license if you want to take a look at that. So just reach out to me directly if you're interested in that at all. Changing gears a bit, I want to talk a little bit about Cloud PKI. So Microsoft introduced InTune Cloud PKI last month. And the nice thing about this is that, so for Always On VPN, we've well, let me back up. For remote access, we have for many years, asked users or organizations to use certificates for authentication, simply because certificates are an excellent credential, strong phishing-resistant credential, which is absolutely vital for probably one of your most critical security workloads, and that's remote access. If you are not strongly authenticating users at your VPN gateway or at your remote access entry point, the risk of compromising your organization is very high. Attackers view remote access gateways as rich targets. It's a very easy way to get into your organization because that's what it's designed to do. So if they can steal credentials and spoof MFA, which is always a possibility, then that's, they're going to have an easy way into your network. But if you're using digital certificates backed by TPM, that is an excellent credential that does that. Now, here's the problem. Certificates are great, but implementing and managing ADCS, Active Directory Certificate Services, to support issuing and managing certificates is challenging. A lot of people don't want to run a CA. You can, and by the way, operating a CA securely is challenging. So Microsoft introduced Cloud PKI, which is basically PKI as a service, right? And the nice thing here is if you're a kind of small to mid-sized organization and you want to offload this, or you don't have a PKI and you want to start using, certificate authentication for. Certainly recommend use it for VPN, but you could also use it for authentication to Windows Hello, like Windows Hello supports certificate-based authentication as well. You might want to start using it for Wi-Fi. Wi-Fi is another excellent workload that could benefit from certificate authentication. So the ability to be able to consume certificates as a service just seemed very natural. And this is a long time coming. And so ultimately, PKI as a service with Microsoft InTune Cloud PKI is nothing more than cloud-based CA. So you spin up cloud-based CAs, you can spin up a root and an issuing CA in the cloud and start issuing certificates. The nice thing about it is there's no infrastructure for you to manage. You don't have to worry about anything. You just spin it up as a service and take advantage of it. And in addition, if you already have an on-premises CA and you simply want to extend your on-premises infrastructure to Azure, you can use something called BYOCA, which is bring your own CA or bring your own certification authority. And this allows you to essentially chain an InTune Cloud PKI issuing CA to your existing on-premises root CA. And there may be some scenarios in which that is compelling. You want to issue certificates, via the cloud to cloud-based devices, but I still need my on-premises CA to do things like, user and device-based authentication for my domain join machines. I need it for my servers. I want to do code signing and document signing and a variety of other things that Cloud PKI doesn't do or doesn't do today. I may need to do that. So this is an effective way to kind of extend that. Cloud PKI is only for InTune managed endpoints. That's critical. It will work with any device that supports SCEP profiles. So it is pretty much everything except Linux, I think. So it's Windows, Mac, iOS, Android, but I don't think it supports Linux today. So anyway, the nice thing is, again, you have this kind of central cloud-based, certificate authority. Very easy to spin up. It is, there's no management overhead necessarily to do it, and it's a pretty interesting scenario. I did write an article about that. So if you visit the website directaccess.richardhicks.com, just search for Cloud PKI. I've written a couple of articles on it already. It may not be for everybody. It's fairly limited in its functionality. There is some cost associated with it that could be potentially a showstopper. At the end of the day, if if you meet the requirements, it might be a compelling solution. It may not be for others. I'll be honest with you. So if you have any questions, again, feel free to reach out to me directly. I'd be happy to consult with you and share with you a lot more details about InTune Cloud PKI and talk more about its strengths and weaknesses. Moving on, Always On VPN CSP updates. There are some CSP updates coming. I don't know if Philip joined the call today. Philip, if you're on, give me a yell. But anyway, Philip and I were having a Philip Kuhn from Microsoft, a good friend of mine, and he was. We were having this chat. There are the CSP. Let me back up for a second. CSP is configuration service provider, and the CSP is essentially the all of the settings that are supported in Always On VPN. Let me actually go here. Let's see here. We'll pull it up here real quick. So the CSP is the document from Microsoft that says, here's all the settings available to you to configure Always On VPN. And there are tons and tons of them. So Microsoft has been adding to the CSP over the years, and they'll add functionality to the CSP, and it unlocks new features and capabilities. And so in terms of that, the CSP is basically growing and changing and evolving. Let me get back to that screen real quick. So you can see that, and this is nice because these are all links, and so I can go to these are settings that apply to the device, and I can drill down and say, well, what are the cryptography suite supported settings? And this is all of the settings that would be supported for that. So, and this is a good reference if you're trying to do Always On VPN with CSP. You would do this if you were using just the PowerShell and the XML file. So this all goes into your XML file. You would also do this if you're using InTune and use the custom XML option. Now, Microsoft, as I'd said before, is adding some new features and capabilities to this. Some of the more recent additions were things like native protocol type. So the native protocol type now supports two new settings, one called SSTP. So when the CSP came out, when Always On VPN came out, there was Ike v2 automatic, and there was a few others that we don't use, but Ike v2 and the automatic were the ones that you would typically use. But there was no SSTP for some reason. So if you wanted SSTP, you had to set it to automatic. Now they actually have SSTP in there, so you can define that. And by the way, I do that for the user tunnel almost exclusively now. That is supported today along with something called protocol list. The protocol list now allows you to define the order of preference between VPN protocols. So for example, I have customers who say, oh, I want to use Ike v2, but if it's not available, let's fall back to SSTP. And that information is available in the protocol list. So if you look at the VPN v2 CSP, look up protocol list, and it will tell you how to use that. I wrote an article about this on the website. If you go to directaccess.richardhicks.com, you'll find it there. This setting is not without some limitations. There's some brokenness with it, and I was hoping Philip would be on because he could address that. I don't know if it's been resolved yet, but bottom line is that if you use that, there are some things that are going to stop working. They're mostly tools. Like I think if you try to run get VPN connection, it doesn't show you anything. There's some other weirdness that goes on there, but use some caution if you're going to experiment with that. Microsoft also released a couple of interesting capabilities through CSP, the disable disconnect button and disabled advanced options button, which means you can now take out of the hands of the users the ability to change the settings or disconnect the VPN, at least in the UI. If they are a power user, they can still do it with RasPhone, or if they got PowerShell, they can go disconnect it with PowerShell. But at the end of the day, you can actually control some of that. And these are all settings that have come out over the last 6 months to a year or so, and they're available now. These are all in Windows 11. I don't believe any of these were backported to Windows 10, but those are available now. However, now, and I've written about this as well, is that there are a bunch of new settings that are in the Windows Insiders preview today that are going to be really, really helpful. And they've been in the Insider preview builds like forever, it seems like about a year. But the good news is they are finally coming. They're going to come out later this year in Windows 11 24H2. One of those settings is use RAS credentials. If you have done any work with Always On VPN and using the native Entra join scenario, you'll know that there's a known issue with with regards to accessing resources via short name. And the way to fix that is set use RAS credentials to turn that off, basically. Don't use RAS credentials. That setting has to be done today in RasPhone. So we have to actually go into RasPhone PBK, the file, the INI file, and actually change that. And I have a PowerShell script that does that. You can do it via InTune remediation. Works moderately well. But at the end of the day, it's going to be nice to be able to just turn this off in XML and not have to worry about having another remediation that's got to run afterwards. In addition, IPv4 and IPv6 interface metrics are coming to CSP later this year. This is really helpful because if you've done any work at all with Always On VPN, you'll know there are some scenarios in which name resolution doesn't work correctly, and the workaround, or the fix, I should say, is setting the interface metric for the VPN interface. And that's again done in RasPhone PBK. You have to run the PowerShell script. You can do that via remediation. But again, if we could just do that out of the box, fantastic. Another one that's coming is the network outage time. Some of the IKE mobility settings, you can actually enable or disable IKE mobility and change the network outage time to meet your requirements. Those are all coming later. Oh, hey, Philip, I see you. Thanks for joining. Philip, let me see if I can find you. Anything, do I miss anything there, Philip, or can you come off mute, or is that broken?
Oh, no, it should work. Hey, Rich.
Oh, there you are. Good. Thank you. Welcome, man.
I think you covered it.
Was there any other settings? Were there any compelling CSP settings that I didn't? Those are the big ones. There's a few other odd ones in there, but I think I got most of them, right?
Yeah, I guess the interface metric is probably the biggest one.
It is.
So this is being recorded, so I need to be careful what I'm saying,
yes.
right?
Yes, please.
Well, this is only one half of the story, right? So it's great that we have this now in the CSP, but guess what? InTune need to pick up on it.
Yes.
Because if they don't timely, then it's great that we have it, but we can't control it for InTune. So, or not, at least not with the native profile, right? So
right. And Philip brings up a good point, is that all of the things that we just talked about the last couple of slides are XML. And so you would use this if you were deploying with a PowerShell script with SCCM, or you were using something else, right? But also if you were using InTune and using the custom XML option. The challenge here is that the settings come out to CSP long before they make it into the InTune native VPN profile. So, for example, class-based default route has been in the CSP for ages, yet it is still not in the Windows UI, right? So, in the native InTune profile in InTune. So, if you want to take advantage of these capabilities, you have to use InTune. And of course, the next issues that I want to talk about are around Windows 11 custom XML. So I'll get to that, and it'll be great to get your feedback on this as well, Philip. But bottom line is, we have this known issue with Windows 11 when you're using InTune deployment where connections drop. You'll have a user say, hey, I'm working along, all of a sudden I just get kicked out, and it'll happen, maybe sometimes several times a day. And we've traced this back to an issue where the VPN profile gets removed and replaced entirely on every device sync, even if there's no changes to the configuration. Okay. Now, this was an issue in Windows 11 when Windows 11 first came out, and Microsoft since fixed it August of last year, but they only fixed it for the InTune VPN template. It is still a problem for us when we're using the XML option. So if you're using custom XML, and it's only InTune, if you're using XML using just PowerShell, installing it locally or installing it with SCCM or something else, doesn't affect you. It's only an InTune thing. So InTune is essentially pushing down the profile and then evaluating it on the next device sync. It sees something in the XML that it thinks is wrong or doesn't agree with and says, oh, I'm going to replace it, even though you haven't made any changes. And so obviously that's highly disruptive. By the way, it's even more disruptive if you're doing a lot of things today via remediation. So if, let's say, you're updating network interfaces and changing network outage time, or adding the use RAS credentials, all of those are written into the rasphone.pbk INI file. And that file is going to be obviously overwritten. So when you get a new profile, boom, all those settings get reverted. So what we're seeing is customers have problems where the remediations run and it works for a while, but then they get a new profile because of this issue, and now the remediations are going to have to run again. So there's a time between which InTune replaces the VPN profile and your remediations run. And if your remediations aren't set to run frequently, because I think the default is daily, then it could be a long time before you come up with, before you get back to a working scenario. So a real challenging issue, one I'm hoping that Microsoft fixes at some point. I did write about a workaround about this. So I have a workaround that I've had mixed results. I've had some success. I'll leave the link for you there. If you just go to my website and just search, Windows 11 disconnect or something like that, you'll find it. But basically what it comes down to is the XML out. So the XML that gets input into your endpoint, gets pushed down to your endpoint, is then reevaluated on the next device sync. And herein lies the problem, is that if you've submitted XML that is in one order and the XML is reordered differently on the endpoint, because that's the way InTune does it, then it's going to evaluate that and then decide that it's not good. Okay, and then replace the profile. So I have had some success, and I'll qualify this by saying some success by, and I've documented this in this article here, by taking a VPN profile, uploading it to InTune, pushing it to an endpoint, and then extracting it from the endpoint, and then taking my XML and reordering it so that it's in the same exact order as what InTune pushed down. I have in my lab for my personal devices, my Windows 11 laptops, my Surface, I have 2 working profiles that don't have a problem. I was able to order them perfectly and everything works, and it's fine. So my user tunnel and my device tunnel on my domain join laptops don't restart. They don't get replaced. So I've done it on my. I have fixed a few customers, and I've also had a few folks reach out to the internet and say, hey, can you show me how to do this or fix this for me? And I've had good success. But others, I swear to you, I have a perfectly valid XML file that is ordered exactly as the one that InTune pushes down, and something InTune doesn't like about it, so it still recycles it and replaces it. So at the end of the day, your mileage may vary on this. So, but if you're having some pain there, let me know. Take a look at that article. Let me know if those help. If not, reach out to me directly, and we'll see what we can do. I don't know if you can share anything about that, Philip, on the inside or on this call anyway. Do you know if it's being addressed? Are they aware of it?
It's being investigated.
Okay, very good, very good. That's all we can ask for, as long as they'll help us at some point. But for now, we do have a bit of a workaround.
Yeah, the challenge is different teams need to talk to each other.
Okay, well, Microsoft is really good about internal communication, though, right?
Amazing, yeah. Amazing.
We'll talk offline. Yeah. Anyway, recordings. Anyway, the last one I want to talk about is an issue that I've seen a fair amount, and it's happened with some regularity, and it's an issue where Always On VPN user tunnels will result in a failed authentication attempt. You'll get an 812 typically on the client, and that indicates there's a problem with the policy. You go look at the NPS server, you'll see that the event code 6273 is raised. When you look at that, you'll see that you'll get a reason code 16, which indicates that the password is incorrect. Well, since you're using a certificate, the password's not incorrect. We didn't type a password, right? So there's no way somebody could have fat-fingered or typed the wrong password in. This is related to known issue with TPM, specifically older TPMs that have a sub-specification version of 116 and older. Although I think I've had a few customers report they've seen some issues with different versions. Just be aware that if you're seeing this issue, there is a solution. I'll say it. Well, the solution is to upgrade the TPM firmware, but upgrading TPM firmware is probably the very last thing any systems management people will ever want to do. I think they'll update BIOS before they upgrade TPM firmware. Upgrading TPM firmware is dicey because if you, obviously if you wipe BitLocker keys when you do that, there could be problems. And anyway, lots of challenges around upgrading TPM firmware. Not a real common state. Most of the time, you get new firmware when you just get a new laptop. So anyway, be mindful of this. That if you have older devices and you're seeing these spurious or random authentication failures, that it could be related to this. The workaround that was provided to me by Microsoft, I had a customer who had a support case open with this, and this was provided to them, to the customer, and so I kind of shared it with everybody, is to basically remove the RSA PSS ciphers. There's a known, I guess, limitation or issue with these ciphers on older hardware, and we've had great luck solving this problem by removing those ciphers. It's just 3 cipher suites. I describe how to do that in this article. I even have an InTune remediation. So if you go to github.com/Richard Hicks /endpoint manager, I think is the repo there. I have some remediation, the remediation script that you can actually push that out there. I will caution you, though, to please test thoroughly, because this is a workaround, not a fix. The fix is upgrading the firmware, but the workaround is, hey, if you remove these, then this issue will go away. But you may introduce some other problems. And I did have somebody reach out to me via email recently who had indicated that, yeah, they disabled it and it broke something else. So at the end of the day, your mileage may vary. Please test thoroughly and just make sure that you're comfortable doing that. I would recommend probably not doing this on a wholesale, making this change on a wholesale basis. I would probably make this change only on those specific endpoints that exhibit this problem. Awesome. Very good. Well, we'll get to the meat of the call here. So we're gonna do the Q&A. Operators are standing by, ready to take your call. If let's see, do we have some questions in the chat yet? Let's see here. I'll get to the first one. And by the way, if you have them, put them in the chat. And I don't know if did anybody put them in the Q&A? No. Use the chat. I think chat's easier for me. Everybody can see that as well. First question, Dan. Network outage times include disable IKE mobility. Yeah, so there's going to be the option to just enable or disable IKE mobility entirely. If you choose to disable it, awesome. If you choose to enable it, but you want to set the outage time lower, then you can do that as well. But that new CSP setting will include that option to, again, either disable it completely or keep it enabled and set the network outage time there. And again, this is one of those things where we had to do this in the INI file, the rasphone.pvk, which is an INI file, and being able to do this as part of the deployment is going to be a huge win. So awesome. Any other questions at all? Pretty light crowd this week. I'm wondering if it's because we have the Windows Server Virtual Summit going on right now. I don't know if anybody else was on that. I was on it this morning. Not super exciting. The kind of the first hour went through mostly a history of Windows Server, which was, I guess, somewhat interesting. But so anyway, it helps. Very good. Let's see. Martin, welcome, Martin. Great to have you on the call. He says you tested static IP address based on the article. Did that work for you or no? Oh, it does work. Okay, it does work, but wait, does not work? Interesting. If you want, you can jump off mute.
Hi. I
hey,
think I better
Martin?
describe it. Yeah, hi.
Yeah.
Hi, Richard. Thank you.
Okay, so you tried that and
yeah, it did work once, and then it seemed to bring down the entire infrastructure. After that, I can no longer connect with the ordinary profiles.
Oh, very interesting.
Does it need to have everybody needs to have a static IP? Because that defeats the purpose.
No,
right?
It should not. It should not. And I'll share with you though, I have only ever done this testing in a very limited environment.
Jeg kan næsten ikke se invertøren is på en stumgesejlet. Kom her.
Yeah, if you're on, can you put on mute? Thank you. Unless you have a question.
Sorry.
No worries. It happens, man. So yeah, I'll share with you, Martin. I've only done very limited testing with this, but no, if you do a static assignment, it shouldn't be for everybody. It just means that when that user connects, they're going to get that IP address. Now, there could be problems if there's an overlap, right? So in other words, if they got the same address as as another system, maybe the VPN server, the VPN server's virtual interface, or another client that would break, I would just make sure that you're assigning that IP address from a range that is not in use, or that there's no overlap. Other than that, in my testing, which admittedly was very limited, it seemed to work okay for me.
Well, it's true that one or two users were able to get the desired IP, but when I tested with other users, I can no longer connect. Will it be related to the same? Because of course, what I have is a laboratory with the same internet connection. Could it be that? I mean, it comes from the same IP address.
Yeah, it's entirely
right.
It's entirely possible. Yeah, I don't know. I will do some testing. I'll do some more thorough testing on that and see if I can get get anything that's repeatable like that. But yeah, it may indeed be related to that. I don't know. Yeah.
All right. Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Great to hear from you, man. Very good. So David says, we get the issue sometimes when reconnecting the user tunnel, it fails. Specify ports already in use, although it appears IKE ports aren't in use. Anyone else seeing this happening? Seems to happen when resuming from sleep hibernate. So I will share with you, David, resuming from sleep hibernate has always been problematic for VPN. Even in direct access, there was huge problems with that back in the day. I don't know that that's necessarily gotten better. There are some group policy settings you can enable to help alleviate some of those challenges. But at the end of the day, that's just kind of a known issue when you're coming out of sleep. Philip, I think there was it was like disabling power management on the NICs. There was a couple of things that you could do to help improve that, correct?
Yeah, but in the end, it's an issue. It's a timing issue.
Yeah.
David, if you can repro this, please reach out to me. I'm trying to find customers for almost 3 years where we can repro this, and every time we find one, they can't because it's so sporadic.
Yeah.
I could, absolutely. I could reach out. It is a little bit tricky to reproduce, but I think we probably could do it by hibernating enough. Because it is every time.
I had another customer. They're saying they can finally repro it when they are actually coming out of sleep or hibernate when it's on battery. So we might want to try this one. But when we actually tried it there, it didn't repro anymore, and then it's like, oh, great. So this is a timing issue. So we don't close the port quick enough, or not. We don't close it at all, and then next time you try, it says, oh, it's already open, although it's not. And yeah, typically resetting the RAS mail service is fixing it. Either rebooting or just killing and resetting the RAS mail service is fixing it. But that's not really a good fix.
Right. Yeah.
Yeah, I think so rebooting definitely fixes it every time for us. We've tried some other things. Like from our research, we saw there's like a netsh IPv4 reset command, and I think that maybe worked for us once or twice, but hasn't worked many more times. So I don't know if there's like different flavors perhaps of the port being in use, but certainly when you run like a netstat, you can't see that those IKE ports or SSTP ports or anything like that are actually in use. So it's a bit. It's actually in the heap memory of the RAS main process. We just don't clean it up there, so you can't easily spot it. So this is why a workaround, a restart or a reset of your RAS main service is fixing it. Okay. And do you think Windows 11 would be any better with this, or is it's just like a design thing?
It's not yet understood how we get into this scenario. I think we got traces of when we are in the scenario, but we didn't fully understand how do we get into that because it's relatively sporadic. Mm-hmm. So the challenge there is we need to get tracing running, then repro the problem, stop the tracing, and then look into how did we end up there. And so far, the last 2-3 years, I haven't seen a single customer who could do that. So if you can, absolutely, please reach out to me.
Sure. Yeah. Is it just Philip Kuhn at Microsoft.com? Is it?
I'll put it in chat.
Yeah. Perfect. Yeah. Thanks. Thank you very much.
Thanks, Phil. Yeah, very good. So it'd be interesting to know if, even as a workaround, if there's an event, if there's an event you can trigger a scheduled task on. If there's an event that indicates you're coming out of hibernation, you could kick off a scheduled task to restart RASMan. That might help in those scenarios if you're having some chronic problems, but that's always a little dicey too. So
there's an event logged when you see this port already open, so you could potentially react on this one.
Oh yeah, that's true. You could turn around that one as well.
6.3 something.
So you see that event restart Razman service, yeah.
Yeah, I think the challenge is it's not always recorded or not timely recorded. So
yeah, good to know.
Depends. Yeah.
Philly, could you just drop that to me, please? I might try seeing whether DPC could do that automatically.
What was that? Sorry.
Oh, hi, Philippe. It's Leo.
Hi, Leo. Hey.
Would you be able to drop me the event log ID so I can see whether I can get that built into DPC automatically when it detects that error?
Let me look from my knowledge database, which is my Outlook inbox.
Perfect, thank you. No promises, but it's the kind of thing that I might be able to add in.
I'll look for it and put it in the chat if I find it.
Yeah, thank you.
And welcome,
Cool,
welcome, Leo. Sorry, I missed you earlier.
Sorry, I overslept.
No worries.
About 10 minutes.
No worries, man. No worries. Very good. Moving on. Let's see here. Seen an intermittent issue where downloads go very slow and fail. These are always fun problems. It's limited to Windows 11 clients only when wired, either in dock or directly. Doesn't happen on wireless. Multiple laptops. In our environment and at different locations. That's interesting, PJ. So performance issues when downloading over VPN are always challenging, just because there's just the nature of the mechanics of moving packets over an encrypted connection, right? Especially one that is I'm assuming I'm curious if you're using IKE v2 or if you're using SSTP, and whether or not it happens with both protocols. Do you know?
Only IKE v2 is in use here. We're using our firewall as the server, and so it only supports IKE v2.
Okay, great. So in that case, we don't have the TCP meltdown issue to worry about, right? So we're not running TCP and TCP, which is a kind of a known limitation of some of the other protocols that use TCP. But it's only Windows 11. That's interesting. I'll ask the standard question. I'm assuming you have upgraded device drivers and firmware for network adapters and the dock and all that good stuff, just to make sure.
Yeah, and these are relative, like it's only the newest laptops that are running Windows 11 too.
Got it.
And, yeah, verifying everything's current, and it's just weird. I mean, everything was so happy on Windows 10, and we start to introduce Windows 11, and
interesting.
People are reporting this intermittent issue, and they're doing small downloads off the internet or something, and it just seems to go slow and then fails halfway through. And
I'm assuming you're using force tunneling, so if you're downloading off the internet, you're actually going through the VPN?
Yes, and it's only doesn't ever happen when they're on wireless. It's only when they're wired. So I didn't know if there's some weird corner case you had heard of where this applied, but
yeah, I'm not aware of any specific issues there, but you may want to take a look at the network interface metric settings, maybe, even though it's typically we'll adjust those because there's name resolution problems, but I don't know, maybe it could be related to performance as well. I'm not certain, but it might be worth a shot.
All right. Thank you. I'll check it out.
Yeah. Very good. Let's see, Mike, when trying. Yeah, Phil, good.
Sorry. I think we're investigating something there, PJ. You said it's only Ethernet.
That's correct. Yes. Never happens when they're on wireless.
Oh, and only IKE.
And only IKE v2 is in play, yeah.
That's all we use, right?
Yeah. We're investigating two performance things or performance challenges, and yours might fall under this one too. If you can, raise a support case or reach out to me.
Very happy to. Thank you.
Sure.
Good to know. Good to know. Awesome. So, Mike, when trying to deploy through InTune using SSTP or automatic, it does not auto join. Gives a prompt action needed. Says we connect enough to validate to the server. You can still connect, or you can still connect if you trust the server. Interesting. So, help me understand here. So, are you deploying this with the custom XML or using the native InTune profile?
Hey, Richard, Mike here.
Mike.
So going through and creating the VPN, but I do have custom XML as well, or the EAP XML, I guess.
Yeah.
Yeah, just so I have the option to through InTune to always connect, always on.
Yep.
And it deploys to the computer. It's fine. Just the user the first time actually has to go in, try to connect, and then click basically accept. I don't know if it's certificate related or if it's something I'm missing in the configuration.
Probably certificate related. Well, it's related to certificates, but it's probably configuration. So if you have to accept the certificate, what's happening is you've specified that NPS. You've specified that you want to use only specific authorized NPS servers. Okay, and so that's basically, hey, I want to use NPS 1 and NPS 2 and NPS 3. And what's happening is when it connects, it's expecting to see a certificate that has that subject name in it from a CA that you trust or that you specified in the XML configuration that you trust. And if it doesn't, by default, it will prompt you. You can turn that off. I can just say, don't prompt, just fail. But it sounds like your settings is, just prompt the user and then go from there. So it's definitely your EAP configuration somewhere. It could be the name. It could be the name doesn't match your server. The name needs to be the FQDN of the NPS server in the field there. It also needs to be a trusted certificate. So the certificate on the NPS server has to be trusted. And then in the EAP configuration, you specify which CA the certificate needs to be issued from. It's possible that you didn't select the right one. So one of those things should solve that problem for you. If you can't sort that out, reach out to me directly and I can provide you with some more information.
Perfect. Thank you very much.
But yeah, should be able to fix that one fairly easy.
Might be also some in the connection string, comma versus semicolon.
Right. Yeah. So that's if you have multiple NPS servers, that list is, I can't remember off the top of my head if it's semicolon or comma.
It's either one. I usually use the wrong one, and then you would exactly see this.
I think it is semicolon. I think there's semicolon.
I think
separate.
It is.
And by the way, and Philip, this is another one. I fixed one for a customer not long ago where they had a space, colon space, and put a name, and that space was bad. So there's like a literal matching for that.
So
string.
Everything after the space was ignored, I guess.
Well, no, it expected to see the name as space NPS 1.
Oh, great.
and it came back as no, just NPS 1 with no space.
Amazing.
So yeah, okay. Pretty clever, huh? So yeah, you got to be careful. Got to be careful there for sure.
Yeah.
Let's see. Robin has a question which says we're having problems with MTU size. This is a good one. The default 14 is set too high. We want to use 1300. The problem is we're using custom XML with InTune, and every sync the MTU changes back to 1400. So, Robin, I think this is related, and I'm assuming this is Windows 11. This is related to what I had talked about at the top of the session, where you're making the change, but the problem is Windows or InTune is rewriting the profile each time. So I think you're just the victim here in this case. I'm assuming, and let me know if this is correct, I'm assuming you've made this change in the RasPhone PPK or someplace else. Still on, Robin? I'll pose that question to Leo because I think, Leo, you were doing some work with MTU in DPC. Do you change the MTU in RasPhone PPK?
No, you can't actually change the MTU in RasPhone PPK. You've got to go messing with the actual NIC configurations, or there's a registry setting that you set to actually modify all of the VPN configurations on the device.
Oh, and it applies to all VPN profiles, not just.
I put it in the chat. It's a really old RasPhone rec key. You can also do it for PPP adapters if you need to. But
interesting. Okay,
but that's system wide for any VPN adapter. We don't differentiate.
So it would affect all VPN adapters. Okay, got
it.
Yeah,
but you can do it. Okay, good to know. Right on. But anyway, if that's set in the registry, I wouldn't expect that the VPN profile being overwritten would change that, though. So I'd be curious to know. So to answer your question, Robin, if you're still there, says, is there a way to set the MTU in XML? Unfortunately, no. That's actually done through that registry setting. So hopefully that helps you out.
Yeah, there's also, just to slightly plug my own product, there's also DPC, which will kind of monitor and reset the MTUs on a regular basis. If you are looking for something that will kind of self-remediate on that.
Very good. So if you set it to 1300, then DPC monitors that?
That's correct. So yeah, it uses a combination of setting the registry setting and uses some of the kind of Win32 API commands to kind of go into the actual individual NIC interfaces and modifies the MTUs directly. The problem with that approach is that the NIC interfaces don't exist outside of a connection actually existing,
right?
Which means that if you're just doing that, you don't set it system wide, you get into some weird and wonderful situations. So we kind of do the double safe approach and do it in both ways.
I see. Just to cover your bases. That makes sense.
Yeah.
Right on. Let's see here. Having issues with InTune, Dan, having issues with the InTune profiles deployed in the user context. Pros, cons of deploying user profile to the system instead. So, excellent question. I typically deploy users in the user context unless I have a need to do otherwise. DPC does deploy them in the system context always, and I've not seen any real negatives to this, to be honest with you. The advantage to doing it in the system context is that you deploy one profile and then all users of the system can use it, right? This is really helpful if you have device sharing scenarios. Many years ago, I was doing a large deployment for a hospital, medical center, and they had lots of devices that were remotely connected, but they were shared workstations. So the nurse would come on and have a shift and then another shift, and they were 24/7. And so it was challenging because if you deploy it in the user context, Windows allows you to have one user profile that's always on. So if another user logs on and gets a new profile, theirs is always on, and the other one for the previous user is no longer always on. So you had to deploy the user profile in the user context. I don't know that there's any negatives to that. I don't know, Philip, maybe if you know anything. I've never encountered any negative scenarios to doing that. I can't think of any off the top of my head. I mean, I've used it a number of times, not had any issues. Your thoughts on that?
I usually deploy it in the system context. It's easier. It's just there for any user.
Yep.
Actually, when you deploy it in the system context, the user with user permissions can't modify it, right? Because it lives in the system context, so they can't just delete it or.
Very good.
Maybe
good enough.
They can maybe change it, but not delete it. So
some pros to it, but I don't know of any cons. So Dan, hopefully that answers the question.
No, that does. Yeah, my issue has been, one user logs in, then someone else logs in, and either won't deploy or it causes issues.
Absolutely. In that scenario, when you're doing device sharing, absolutely deploy it in the system context. You'll be much better off.
Yeah. Follow-up would be, so I got 8 devices I have deployed in the user context now. If I wanted to switch my profile deployment to system, what impact would I possibly see on those? Or
so you'll definitely want to remove the existing user base profile. So are you using InTune to do that today?
That's all.
Yeah,
that's InTune.
Okay. Yeah, I would just basically remove that profile from the user and then just start deploying it in the system context, right? So you have to do that with XML and InTune, right? And you use the device vendor MSFT path, OMA URI. If you're already deploying it, I would just start with a new profile. That way you can remove the old one, and Windows should remove that. In my experience, sometimes Windows doesn't always remove a profile when you use XML. Sometimes it does, sometimes it doesn't. What you can do is you can actually create, and I believe I have one published. You can use InTune remediation to just go out and look for the old profile and remove it. So, but I wouldn't try to keep both of them. I would definitely try to clean that up and remove the old ones.
Thank you.
Yeah, The only issue I've found with system profiles is that if you start making changes, the profile can actually get cached under the user's context.
Yes.
At which point, what you can just do is delete the version that's under the hidden PPK folder within the user context, and the next time the profile runs, it'll go and recache it from the system context.
That is an excellent point. So the way this works is when you do user context-based VPN profiles, there is the INI file. We've talked about it several times here today, rasphone.ppk. It's an INI file, and that basically contains all the settings for your VPN profile. They're in each user profile, so each user profile could create their own VPN connections, and other users logging onto the system would never see them. So they each have their own rasphone PPK. It's in their own path, right? Their own user profile path. When you deploy user profiles in the system context, it puts it in a central location. When the user logs on, they will copy that configuration file to the location in their user profile. So they basically replicate it to their profile. And what Leo's saying is that it gets copied to the same path where they would, if you created a regular VPN profile for a user, but it's under a separate folder called hidden PPK. And what happens is if you make changes to the system context profile, somebody who's already logged on has already copied that file over to their user profile, and it doesn't get updated there. So if you make changes to a VPN profile post-deployment, you may need to go force kind of the replication there by just removing the hidden one and forcing it to recache, and you should be good. Just be mindful that may be the only sticking point there for doing that.
Thanks. Yeah, I'm well aware of that with SCCM deployments.
Good deal. Yeah, and I've had other customers that we've basically had to write some scripts to go back and say, hey, anytime we make changes, then when a user logs on, go wipe that out or copy the file, or there's some way to deal with it, but you can usually fix it.
And I think this is the technical reason why we shouldn't modify the rasphone PPK manually, but well.
Right. Yeah.
Well,
absolutely.
Well, yeah.
Yep. Very good. So getting back to PJ, so I can piggyback on Robin's MTU question. How often do you find yourself needing to adjust MTU, and what are the go-to settings? My bandwidth on AOVPN versus our firewall's SSL VPN client is about half, so suspect IPv2 overhead is causing some fragmentation. Left MTU 1400 on the client side, set MTU 1400 on the server, and MSS to 1300, but no luck. That's a good question. So I have had very little experience to changing MTU settings. I don't know that we have any challenges or issues there. I know, Leo, you've done this because you had to integrate this with a DPC, so I know you had some direct experience. You want to speak to that one?
Yeah, so the MTU configuration within DPC, while supported, it's not something I would go around recommending to every customer to mess with. In the general, I think that both Richard and Philippe would kind of attest to the defaults in this case are normally pretty damn good, and it's only... We've had one or two customers that had very specific issues with very specific ISPs that really tripped into issues. So my general recommendation is, unless you're able to kind of do real testing and validate that it's going to improve things, I wouldn't go around touching it. It's one of those settings that is better left alone. I would say that from a kind of a bandwidth perspective, all VPNs do have a performance impact on it, and I wouldn't be expecting anywhere near line speed when it comes to throughput. So it ultimately setting MTU things might work, but make sure you do thoroughly test it in a validatable way.
Yeah. Thank you for that, Leo. Yeah, I was trying to see if I could get the speeds closer to what they were using like an SSL VPN client. That's what I was comparing against, not so much the line speeds. And
Dan, were you testing with IKV2?
I was doing IKV2. Yeah, it's
okay. I'd be curious
IKV2 exclusively.
Okay, so you have to use IKV2. I was be curious to know if you had any difference between SSTP, because I've done some testing before and found that SSTP actually had better throughput. Go figure. Why, I don't know. You wouldn't think so, but
yeah. So we're coming off. We had been using like our firewall's SSL VPN client.
Yeah.
You know, the bandwidth there was at like 100 megs, and then switching to AO VPN, it dropped down to 60, and it's still usable from a the user's perspective, but trying to get it more in line there. And MTU is what I thought. Maybe there's just an increased fragmentation, so I was playing around with it, but really couldn't hit on anything that brought those numbers more in line.
You could also, if you suspect fragmentation, you could also look at using something like Packetmon, which is built into Windows Server as of 2019, I think it is, to actually look at see whether the packets hitting your server are fragmented or not.
Yeah, take a trace on the client and the server and just compare. Yeah, pktmon.exe, it's a pretty powerful tool.
All right, I'll check it out. Thanks, guys.
You got it. Yep. Dan, also issues with the RS database consuming all RAM, log file expands after reboot, compress inbox counting database works, but the database fills after every reboot. Wow, that is interesting. First and foremost, Dan, did you run the optimize in that power? So you've installed my optimize or my inbox counting database management PowerShell module, I'm assuming. Did you run the optimize inbox counting database command?
I did.
Okay, great, because that's a known issue where there's an index that's missing on a table, one of the tables, and it actually dates back to the direct access days, where it will SQL Server process consumes a lot of CPU and memory, typically under very busy conditions. That being said, the next question would be: it fills the data. Is the database still on the system drive?
It is.
Okay, yeah. So I don't know why. I mean, typically the inbox counting database is pretty well behaved. It does kind of grow, and that's why that compression tool helps. For those of you on the call who are listening, I have a PowerShell module called Inbox Counting Database Management, and it has some tools that allows you to manage the remote access inbox counting database. That database is a SQL database, and it requires maintenance like anything else, like any other database. And so you can compress the database, back up the database. But also, Dan, there's a tool to move that database. So I actually wrote that tool because I had a customer who wanted to have, they were a very busy environment, and they also weren't willing to shorten their data retention. They had to have data retention for like 2 years, and period. That was the end of story. So we ended up having to move the inbox counting database to a separate data drive. That may be a better option than trying to fight with this. You may want to look into that.
Yeah, it's not even it's like the LDF file that's in the direct access folder. Like the database doesn't seem to change size, but the LDF, it will drop down to 0.
Yeah.
Pretty low after doing compress inbox counting database.
Right.
Then I do a patch and reboot, and then suddenly it starts ballooning again until it fills the disk up. It's really odd.
Wow, that is strange. Yeah, I don't know necessarily what would be causing that. And again, moving it to a separate drive may just delay the problem, right? If there's something else going on, but that's unusual for sure.
At least if it's on a separate drive, it's not going to completely kill the server.
Or it will be longer, right? If you put a 2 terabyte volume on there, it's going to have to grow a little bit longer to do that. But yeah, or maybe you just, we find the upper limit that it stops at a gig or, or 10 gig, or I don't know what it might, terabyte or something. I don't know, but that's interesting.
No, I've been throwing disk at it. I'm throwing disk at them again.
Yeah.
And then you're saying it's taking a lot of RAM as well.
Yeah, they have 48 gig of RAM on them, and it's using 41.
Wow.
Yeah. You probably want to limit it, right? There is I think nowadays there's even a PowerShell command to do that. So you can limit the max memory of the SQL bit process, because it's really just taking everything you can.
Interesting.
Yeah, that'd be great if I could limit that.
Yeah,
it doesn't really affect performance, but yeah, if I had the script would be good to know.
Yeah.
I used some SQL CLI tools in the past, but that's in the 2012 days.
Yeah.
I think nowadays there's something built in through PowerShell where you can do that.
Good to know.
And how many users is this if it's filling up the database so quickly?
I mean, each server probably, I think users, I got like 6,000 users.
Okay, that's not that much. I vaguely remember seeing something, and I think the solution was to disable accounting and re-enable it because there was apparently something broken between remote access management console and the SQL database.
Oh.
Yeah, I guess that's maybe something to try. And that would certainly limit the SQL memory because it doesn't need more than a few gig because it's just literally writing log files.
Right. Yeah.
Yeah, maybe give that a try.
Very good. Yeah, keep us posted. Let me know what you find on that, Dan. I'd be curious to know. And Philip, if you have that, I'll do some research after the call if I remember. That command to maybe limit SQL Server memory, that might be helpful as well.
Yeah, I got something from the SQL guys back then, and you had to install a tool and run some weird commands. But I think nowadays you can do this for PowerShell. It might need to research that.
I have a SQL Server resource. Maybe I'll reach out to him.
Oh,
and
okay.
Find out. I'll let you know if I find anything. So
Cool.
awesome.
Very good. Sorry, one follow-up. So disable and re-enable the inbox accounting. Does that affect historical data or Philip?
The database is the same, right? So if you leave the database where it is, it should just reattach the database.
Yep. By the way,
as with everything, make a backup before you do any changes.
I was going to say, and I have there is a backup database tool as a part of that PowerShell module. So back that up, export it, just make sure it's saved somewhere in case you want to get it back. So
thanks.
Yep. And by the way, that PowerShell module has a remove inbox accounting database because I had a customer once that had a corrupted database, and just unchecking and rechecking didn't help. I actually needed to wipe the database. And so that tool will actually go into SQL and remove that database. And so when you re-enable it, actually recreates the database itself. So make sure you back up before you do any of that, but that tool might help you as well. So awesome. Next, is there a way to secure device tunnels outside of blocking certificates? It says it doesn't scale well. It doesn't scale in environments with thousands of devices. So help me understand, John, is this you're trying to block a device connection specifically? Is that what that is?
Yeah, we're looking to switch to device tunnels from user tunnels, and since it doesn't use NPS, there's no group-based thought. So all I found was your reference and some comment on your blog post about blocking certs.
So yeah, that's the challenge with the device connection is it's not Active Directory authenticated. It's just a certificate check. So if you have a device tunnel and you have a device certificate and that certificate is valid and trusted and so forth, then you can connect. And so there's no group to take them out of or anything. The only way that you can prevent a device tunnel from connecting, and there's a couple of different ways, let me describe that. The first and probably the quickest and the most positive is to grab the device's certificate. You can get that from, if you have access to the device, it's easy, you can just grab it from the device. But if you don't have access to the device, then you can grab it from the issuing CA. You have to search for it. But as soon as you find it, export the certificate. You don't need the private key, you just need the certificate. And then you can import that into the untrusted publishers store on the VPN server. And as soon as the certificate's in that untrusted publishers store, it will not allow a connection from that device. If they're already connected, you have to terminate their connection forcibly on the VPN server. They will try to reconnect, but now their certificate's in the untrusted store, and then they won't be able to connect. But as you mentioned, that's tough to scale because I have to find that certificate. And if you're issuing thousands or tens of thousands of certificates, just finding the certificate can be challenging. And then putting it in all those stores is challenging too, although you could automate that with PowerShell. At the end of the day, you could just revoke the certificate. So you still have to find their certificate in some capacity. If you were to revoke it, then that would help. But here in the shortcoming of that is that two things. One, the Windows Server Routing and Remote Access Service, RAS, does not perform revocation checks by default. You can have to turn that on. So I've had people reach out to me and say, hey, I revoked the certificate. It still connects. And it was like I revoked it a month ago. Well, sure, it's not performing revocation checking. There is a registry setting that you have to set on the RAS server to enforce IKV2 certificate revocation checking. So if that is done, if you revoke the certificate on your CA and publish a new CRL, then the client won't be able to connect at some point. Here's the problem. Windows caches CRL lookups. So what happens is if the VPN server sees this connection, it performs, assuming it's enabled, revocation checking is enabled. It will perform a revocation check. It'll go out to your OSP server or your HTTP responder or LDAP or wherever your CRLs are published, and it will copy that CRL locally and cache it until it expires. So you could issue a CRL, or you could revoke the certificate, issue a new CRL, and the client will still be able to connect because this valid CRL is still cached. So then what you have to do is you have to go clear the disk and memory CRL caches on all of your VPN servers for that to work. At the end of the day, this is one of the shortcomings of device-based connections, is that they are not as easy to terminate or prevent connections as it is user tunnels, because you just take them out of the group and they can't connect. So those are your options there. Unfortunately, both have their own limitations. Hopefully that helps you answer your question.
Yeah, it's a bit challenging because in our case we issue certificates to all devices, like they get a workstation cert, auto enrolled. Yep. So everything. So the population that we want to allow is very small. Let's say hundreds, versus we don't want to allow the remaining thousands.
Right.
So yeah, but it sounds like there's really no other approaches. We want to make sure I'm not missing anything.
Yep. That's pretty much where you're at, unfortunately.
Yeah. All right. Thank you.
You got it. Let's see here. Next question. Let's see. My question: How forced tunneling routing without exceptions works? So the problem I'm facing is I have two default gateways. That's a problem. We'll talk about this in a second. Two default gateways. One goes to my local gateway. The other one goes to the AOVPN. I prioritize this one with the metric. I see. The next hop of route exclusion is the IP of my VPN server. I may not be doing this properly. So when we're talking about route exclusions, those route exclusions are made on the client. So I'm assuming you're talking about forced tunneling with exclusion routes. And those are decisions that are made on the client. Once that traffic comes to the server, then it just follows the path out of the server as you'd stated. We don't ever recommend having two default gateways, although at least you have two default gateways with different metrics. That's actually better. Sometimes that can be used for like dead gateway detection and so forth, but typically we would just have one. But I'm not sure. Specifically, maybe you can come off mute and clarify here. What specifically is the problem? Is the traffic not coming over the tunnel or not being excluded from the tunnel correctly, or how's that work? Or you're not able to get to internet resources, or?
Yeah. Hi everyone. I'm calling from France, so I'm gonna speak slowly.
Very good.
I don't know. In my setup, when I create the forced tunneling on the PC, on the PC, I have two default gateway. One, as I mentioned, goes to the local gateway, and the other one goes to the IP of the Always On VPN. So, according to you, that's a problem.
Okay, this is on the client. Okay, so this is a problem
on the client side.
It's not a problem on the client. When you have that, if you were doing this on the server, and that's my apologies there. I thought you were doing this on the server. That would be a problem. We definitely want to avoid that on the server. But on the client, you're absolutely right. When you enable forced tunneling, you'll have a default route that points to the VPN gateway, right?
That's correct.
But the exclusion routes, if you've added exclusion routes, should bypass that. Is that not working correctly?
Yeah, it's not working correctly because when I add an exclusion route, it mentioned that for let's take an example, one IP, it said the next hop is the Always On VPN IP. So I don't understand why it doesn't take the IP of the local the local internet access.
Good question. I'm not certain. I have very, very limited experience with forced tunneling and exclusion routes as well. I don't use those scenarios very often.
Okay.
I know, Leo, you had implemented exclusion routes in DPC when those first came available. Do you have any experience there?
I've implemented it. I must admit, I can't remember what the route table looks like off the top of my head.
and I don't know, and I don't have anything to test either. So unfortunately, I don't think I can help you. Philip, any thoughts on that?
There is a command, a PowerShell command, test hyphen net, not test connection. Sorry. What's it called? Find net route. Find net route. That should tell you. You do a find hyphen net route, remote IP address, give it an address, and it should tell you at least over which adapter it would flow. So that's usually an indicator. And from a route table perspective, what you should see is either the address or the network. You should see that in the route table, and the next hop should be either on link or your local default gateway. If you don't see that, there's probably some config issue somewhere.
Yeah, I think there's a problem with the confusion. Yeah, because if you I've configured the forced tunneling, and even I put an exception for subnet, it goes to the VPN. So okay, I'm gonna check again.
Yeah, and, sounds like the exclusion route doesn't work. Might be some typo there or in the wrong part of the XML file. How do you deploy the VPN profile? Through Profile XML or InTune or?
To be honest with you, maybe I do it in a dirty way, because how I deploy Always VPN is that I create the profile on a laptop with the Profile XML and PowerShell. Once when I set all the parameters and I adjust everything, I copy and paste and deploy the RAS1 PBK file on the laptop. I don't know that's a nice way to do that, but I see it's the quickest, because if you go to the Profile XML, it's a headache. It's a bit nightmare for me. So this why I do it that way.
It's creative, I get that, but it's probably borderline supported. So it might just be a side effect of that.
And it's funny you mentioned that as well, because I've done some testing. I did some testing with that many years ago, because I'm with you. It seemed like, well, if I can just copy this file, what am I going through all of this work to do all this other stuff? But what I have found is that when I copy that RASFON file, it brings over the VPN profile, but it doesn't make it always on. It's not an always on VPN profile.
Yeah, that's because WMI registry have no idea about it, right?
That's right. So so basically you're not getting all of the VPN profile when you just copy the RASFON file. At least for an always on VPN connection. So yeah, just copying that file is probably not sufficient. So my suggestion would be to test this with a proper XML that you've deployed using PowerShell and see if you still have the same results.
Yeah, I think if you do that, copy RASFON, even if you do a get hyphen VPN connection, it will not find it, right? Because get VPN connection reads from WMI, and there's just nothing in WMI.
Right.
So
But the thing is, from I'm telling you from the reference PC that I'm generating the RASFON PBK. So
I see.
At my template PC, I already see the problem. So
yeah, I would say run that find net route command and let's see if it's working. That should tell you at least what Windows thinks the path should be, which interface it would take.
And you should see an exclusion in the routing table. If you don't see that, then it's not being applied, and then we need to troubleshoot why.
Yeah. it doesn't apply because when I run the command route print, it says that the next hop it's the VPN IP. So that
it sounds like it's not being.
Even the trace route command says okay, it goes to the VPN.
Good to know.
So maybe. Yeah, so I see that it looks like that there's not you don't have a lot of experience and have a lot of in the force tunneling. So okay.
It sounds like a config thing to me. It sounds like the exclusion route is not being properly set.
Sounds like it. Yeah.
Just my last question. So because is that normal that I have two default gateway on the client side and have to play with the metrics to say that for the force tunneling I prioritize the Always On VPN IP gateway to have the force tunneling. Is that normal?
I would say you shouldn't. Yeah, I would say you shouldn't
normally
have to do anything. Yeah. So.
Okay.
Yeah. Normally it should just say, because that's the idea of the force tunnel, right? You want everything flowing through the tunnel other than maybe access to the VPN gateway.
Yep.
But anything else should flow through that tunnel. So normally that should just work out of the box.
Yeah. And what I expect is that if I add a VPN route command, I should see for Microsoft IP, the next hop is my local gateway, it's not the VPN IP gateway. So
yeah, true. Okay. If you do an exclusion, that would be should look like that. Yeah.
Absolutely.
Thanks.
Yeah. Very good.
Thank you.
All right. Thank you. Next question, Mike. When checking DHCP, the IP address of the client connected through Always On VPN shows the Always On VPN server itself. DNS, on the other hand, shows the IP with the correct computer name. Is this normal behavior? So it sounds like I'm just going to take a little bit of a guess here. So when you're using DHCP with RSA, with Always On VPN, the clients don't register or don't receive DHCP addresses directly. The clients don't talk to the DHCP server. The VPN server does. So when the VPN server registers or grabs that block of IP addresses, it will it basically leases a block of IP addresses when the remote access service starts, and it leases those out. It manages those leases for its clients. So it goes to the DHCP services, give me 20 addresses or whatever your settings are. I think the default is 20. But it grabs a block of 20 addresses, and then it manages those on behalf of its VPN clients. Typically, the VPN server will not register any of those IP addresses with its name in DNS because it's not ultimately the owner of those. So what you're saying is that you're saying it shows the VPN server. So what I suspect is that your DHCP server is set to register the name in DNS on behalf of the DHCP client. And in this case, the DHCP client is the server, not your client. So I would expect that behavior then, if that answers your question, Mike.
Sure, yeah. So it should show up in DNS the way it is then, because right now in DNS it shows up like whatever the computer connected is. It shows up properly with the IP that's leased to it. Mm-hmm. And then in DHCP there could be 10, 20 entries that different
all
IPs,
of the server.
Yes, that have correct. under the I forget what column it is, but it does say RAS as well. So
that's correct. Yeah, absolutely. That is 100% expected, because when the clients connect, the clients don't talk to the DHCP server. When you start the server and the service starts, that service says, "Oh, we're using DHCP." It goes to your DHCP server and says, "Give me 20 addresses." It basically just goes through the whole process 20 times to lease those addresses. So your DHCP server will say RAS, but when your clients connect, they will register their IP address in DNS. And so that's totally expected.
Okay, perfect. Thank you.
You got it. Very good. Let's see here. Looking at some chats here. Are there any gotchas or odd behaviors to watch out for migrating Server 2022 Azure's from on-premises to Azure? So Are we talking specifically with regards to the VPN workload or just servers in general here, David? So
sorry, Richard, could you repeat that?
Yeah. So the question is, you'd asked about any gotchas or odd behavior for migrating Server 2022 from on-premises to Azure. My question is, are we talking about specifically for the RAS workload, or are we talking about just Windows Server 2022 in general?
Oh no, just the RAS workload. Yeah.
Okay,
So we got the on-prem system been working really well for us for a number of months. But we're now looking to migrate our infrastructure all up into Azure. Just trying to get ahead of it. And I know you've got like a small chapter in your book, which mentions some things about root tables and stuff. That's really good. It's really helpful. Just want to see if there's anything else that we should really be watching out for.
So RAS is not formally supported in Azure. I'll share with you that right up front. I'm sure I stated that in the book. But it does work. I do have customers that deploy it there. I actually deployed one last week. And so, one of the things you have to be cautious of is that you have to use the static address assignment method because you can't use DHCP in Azure because it doesn't work in the traditional way that it does on premises. And you have to use a unique subnet, and you have to define those routes in a user-defined route or a routing table in Azure. But other than that, it usually works and works quite well. I've not had any problems with it. Never had any customers had any problems with that. But yeah, I think the migration should go fairly smoothly. Just make sure you're not using DHCP, that you're using static address pool, and that you get your routes sorted out. And again, if you're accessing the gateway in Azure and you're crossing on premises, that obviously the traffic selectors have to be updated on your site VPN if you're using site VPN. Firewalls might need to be updated. On premises routes need to be updated. They need to know where those subnets live now. So other than that, should work well, I would expect.
Okay, brilliant. It's good to hear that you've had some success. Yeah.
Yep, absolutely. Let's see here. This is a long one. Yeah.
One thing, I did some VPN work recently with. Are you using vWAN at all, or is it kind of traditional VNets?
Sorry, is that a question for me again?
Yes. Sorry.
Yeah, just traditional VNets at the moment.
Cool. I'll shut up then. There's some interesting issues with VWANs and spokes that then have other spokes off the side of them, a la VPN connections, where we had to deploy some BGP we were doing a Cisco VPN. But if you're just using standard VNets, then you don't need to worry about any of that.
True.
That all sounds incredibly complicated and scary.
Good.
It was 2 weeks of my life I'm never getting back.
Yeah, we'll avoid that then.
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks for that, Leo. Let's see, PJ, this is a long one here. So occasionally a network connection shows no internet access, though my connectivity is fine. Happens wire to wireless. Get net connection profile shows the connection is no traffic. Reg setting to disable interface mining when doing NS lookups is in place. Registry setting to enable active probing is in place. Verified address Windows tries resolve. Yeah, the DNS.msft. Yep, that resolves correctly. Thought it was just a cosmetic issue. And then Office links, no internet. Yeah, absolutely. Office doesn't work over that. Excellent question. So there's a couple of other registry settings or group policy settings that affect this.
Okay.
And I don't have them right here, but if you will reach out to me.
Sorry.
I forget what it is. I have it in my notes. I can send it to you, or I can paste it in chat after the call. Or PJ, if you just reach out to me directly, I'll provide you with that information. There's a couple of other group policy / registry settings that you might need to set that I've had good luck with fixing that.
There's one, I think, min hop count. So NCSI expect.
There's the other one, expect domain controller. There's another setting, something like that. I forget what it is. It's in my notes. I got to go dig it up.
All right, thank you. Yeah, it comes and goes. It's really weird.
Yeah, reach out to me, PJ. I'll send you that information.
All right, thanks so much.
You got it, man. Very good, cool. Thanks for the examples there, Leo, too. Appreciate that. I think we're at the end of the question list. Nobody put anything in QA that I missed, right? Good. All right, awesome. Is there any other questions at all? We kind of covered a lot of topics today. I think think it was good progress. Hopefully everybody got their questions answered and answered satisfactorily. But anyway, it's great hanging out with everybody and talking shop. Like I said, hopefully you found some good information on this. I'll leave this contact screen up here for a few minutes after the call, but consider me a resource. If you have any questions at all, don't wait till the next AMA. We'll probably, I try to do these about once a quarter, so we might talk again in June or so. But if you have any questions, my information is there. I'm available on all of the social media platforms, although I was going to say Twitter. X is my platform of choice. That's where you'll find me most often. But I'm very infrequently on Facebook. So if you're using Facebook and you send me a note there, don't expect a response right away. You can find me on X. LinkedIn's another good one as well. I also have GitHub and YouTube if there's some good resources there if you want to check that out. If you have any other questions at all, just feel free to drop me a note directly. I'm happy to answer any questions you might have. But I think that should wrap it up for today. I think we'll call it. And if anybody else has any questions, just hit me up directly. And thanks for your time, everybody. I appreciate it. Cheers. Have a good one. And special thanks to Philip and Leo for joining and providing some additional insight there. Thank you both. Appreciate it. And we'll talk to everybody again soon. Cheers, everybody.